Good afternoon and welcome to a virtual panel discussion on the topic of faculty well-being and development. My name is Aishwarya Gupte and I'm a research analyst at QSIGH. Since the lockdown initiated in March 2020, QSIGH has been actively hosting online events on various areas pertaining to the Indian higher education sector. Today's webinar is especially important to us as we unfold a new topic of mental health and well-being of the faculty across the world. We recently conducted a survey of a sample group of faculty members across public and private universities and colleges and India, who provided us a very insightful and honest feedback on their perspective and approach towards online teaching and learning and how it impacts their health and well-being in general. In today's panel discussion, we've invited eminent speakers to shed light on this topic. They would be introduced shortly by Dr. Ashwin Fernandez, who would be moderating this session. But before we begin with this panel discussion, I wish to demonstrate some of the key findings based on our survey. These inputs would further help us in shaping our discussion. I'll be sharing my presentation now. So the findings of the survey have been collated into a comprehensive report named Anxious Academia, which is now available across all our platforms. It has also been covered by popular channels like Times of India, The Week, etc. First and foremost, an overview of the report. Over 2,200 faculty across the country responded to our survey, and our report highlights the following aspects: anxiety and stress in online teaching, changes in interpersonal relationships, tech support and challenges, faculty recommendations and best practices, and mental health and well-being of faculty. Then, so we'll first start with anxiety and stress during online teaching. Approximately 46% indicated that they experienced an increase in fatigue post the shift to online teaching. And also, about 60% faculty said that they had an increased anxiety and stress since the onset of online teaching. Then comes changes in interpersonal relationships. The relationships of faculty with their students, colleagues, and administration have in general indicated a positive trend. However, it was concerning that compared to their colleagues and administration.
Aishwarya, sorry to interrupt you. Your voice is breaking. If you could please stay closer to the mic because we are not able to hear you. Thank you.
Sure. Next is changes in interpersonal relationships. So the relationships of faculty with their colleagues, students, and administration has in general indicated a positive trend. However, it was concerning that compared to their colleagues and administration, the relationship of their faculty with the students worsened for 17% faculty members. Then comes tech support and challenges. It was good to know that 87% faculty received a proper training and tech support from their institution. Some of the most common tech challenges were issues with internet connectivity, navigation on LMS platforms, interrupted power supply, and lack of adequate IT accessories. Next is challenges faced by faculty. The biggest challenge faced by the faculty turned out to be attention span of students. Over 70% faculty indicated that they struggle to sustain the attention span of students in the online classes. This was accompanied by class interaction, then followed by managing student groups and adjusting to online teaching methods and tools. Lastly, faculty recommendations. Overall, the faculty recommended 5 core areas which are crucial for any institution and should be addressed efficiently for a seamless and smoother online teaching and learning experience. First, improved and upgraded infrastructure. Second, efficient and user-friendly LMS. Third, enhanced communication and management. Fourth, efforts taken by the administration to ensure faculty well-being. And fifth, training, tech support, and skill development. This brings us to the end of our presentation. We've also produced other interesting reports which are now available on our website, www.igage.in. Our current report, Anxious Academia, is also available on our website. So now it's time to begin with our panel discussion. I invite Dr. Ashwin Fernandez to take this event forward. Over to you, Ashwin.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya. And it's very interesting insights you have brought to us today. I would like to welcome all of you joining us on YouTube and also on other platforms which we have gone live or will be going live in a short period of time. Thank you for joining us for this roundtable with two esteemed guests we have today talking about faculty well-being and development. So without any delay, let me first introduce our first panelist, Dr. Arvinder Singh, who is a mental health practitioner with over 20 years of experience, educated in India and abroad. And her mission has been to bring the best mental health practices to India while promoting a narrative of well-being. She's currently the director for Ashoka Center for Wellbeing at Ashoka University. She has also been part of many projects where she has supported traumatized populations affected by disasters and other challenges. We are truly delighted to have with us Dr. Singh today. Welcome, Dr. Arvinder Singh.
Thank you very much. I'm as delighted as you are to be at this platform and share our insights and talk more about mental health.
Brilliant. Our next panelist, all the way from Australia, Professor Catherine Bennett. She's trained in epidemiology and population genetics. I had to Google that word, and for those who do not know, an epidemiologist is often referred to as a disease detective. So Professor Bennett's career cuts across government and university roles with a focus on contributing knowledge that drives change for good in clinical and public health contexts. She has been a leading public health expert in the COVID-19 response, involved in collaborations which are examining the direct and indirect mortality across over 30 countries, and also the evidence behind the public health policy decisions. Professor Catherine Bennett is the inaugural chair in epidemiology at the Deakin University, Australia. We are so glad, Professor Catherine, you decided, you agreed to come with us today on this live panel, even though it's an odd hour for you in the evening. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I do agree with Dr. Singh. This is an incredibly important area in terms of the major shifts we've seen across faculty and the impacts of COVID on our teaching programs in particular. So I'm very pleased that you have been doing such important work, and to be able to share this across countries as well as some of the things we're all learning and we're all trying to work with to get that better outcome for all of our academics.
Thank you so much, Professor Catherine. So as the report which we just released today, which was covered by most of the national dailies in India, showcases that 60% of those surveyed have seen an increase in stress levels, with over 9% showcasing a sharp increase. Also, 46% of them have seen increased fatigue and exhaustion post the shift to online teaching. So is that alarming? I would like to pose that question to Dr. Singh. What are your initial thoughts on these numbers, and how do you think it will affect academia in the long term?
Well, to answer your question first about if it is alarming, yes, of course it is alarming, because it's, let's just look at it. Whereas stress has been a very normal part of everybody's daily living, and if we were to really look at anxiety, I sort of be bold and say that each one of us is on a spectrum there, right? So, but the fact is that the pandemic, the uncertainty, the health anxiety, the anxiety around our health has increased so much that it has overall increased. So if we were to see the spectrum of stress to crisis, we say stress, and then the undealt with stress becomes distress, and that distress which compounds becomes crisis. So people who've had, there is enough research body to show that people who had mild kind of stress or anxiety have, due to the pandemic and during the pandemic, moved into the moderate and severe spectrum of, depression and anxiety both. anxiety being the top of the charts for the most obvious reasons. So yes, it is alarming, and I think we need to take cognizance. What was the second part of the question you raised to me, Ashwin? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
And how will it impact academia in the long term?
Well, impacting academia in the long term, of course, what's happening now will have ripple effects. So the whole process of online teaching and learning has actually changed the way, the teacher and the taught are engaging. So as a psychologist, I'm interested in that part as well, because that there was, one of the parts of your survey which talked about the interpersonal relationships. So it has changed because there's a lot of stress that is coming on the students as well as the academia. And what I find is that willy-nilly the faculty has moved into the role also of being sort of the frontline workers for the students, right? So they're also, other than the study part, they've also had to handle the emotional distress that the students are going through. And let alone their own distress for the various reasons that is there. So handling that has also changed the way the whole learning process is being looked at. So we've always had online, but the kind of lack of choice that's there, because it's not, it's been totally substituted for the person-to-person or in-person contact, and there's a lot of loss of that whole that interaction, the spontaneity, the way questions are asked or gazes are glanced, or, the way groups are formed. That kind of energy has become transformed, and it has changed into a more, I wouldn't say like totally just didactic way, but kind of directive form of teaching because of online. So that's a large thing that I would like to present here.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that the role of the tutor or the faculty member has become more than just delivering the lecture, but also supporting the student in terms of the stress levels coming from the other side. Over to Professor Catherine. I mean, what have we seen in Australia? And in the early days of the pandemic, we've seen that Australia was well equipped because online component in the teaching process was well adopted many years ago, whereas for India it was just thrown at it was a surprise, and we had to put stopgap measures. So do you think that has impacted Australia, or what does your study show, Professor Catherine?
It's very interesting because universities are very different across Australia. Some have, like Deakin University, my university, have really invested in their online teaching, their cloud teaching, and that's been a major piece of work. And so we'd moved from perhaps just putting our lectures into talking PowerPoints to a much more sophisticated interactive platform. But we still have, even at Deakin, a lot of students that choose face-to-face because that's their preferred learning. They're not comfortable in the computer world and in the cloud. And so what changed for us was that we actually had to move every subject pretty much, has an online version, but not all. We also have some that were taught in intensive mode and really built on face-to-face, particularly our laboratory work and so on. So there was still that big challenge at the start about how we're going to do this, how we're going to put everything online, and then how we're going to bring all those students with us who are going to find this stressful when we're already stressed. So we've done a lot of work looking at academic stress levels in Australia over the years, and they've been increasing. So this is against a background where we already had our faculty feeling that their workload was changing, that they were needing to do a lot more high technology work, learn new skills, and suddenly that's accelerated. And at other universities, that was even more so, because these were people sometimes who'd never actually had to teach online at all and didn't have the technology skills, let alone the sort of pedagogy skills to understand how you translate the interaction you have in the classroom, as Dr. Singh described, that spontaneity, that ability for one student to stimulate another student's thinking or questioning. You lose that when you're online unless you know how to foster that. So I think this came in different phases. And if you did your survey at different time points, you'd get different answers from the same people, because that initial thing about the fear about how this could work, and then how it did transition, and then just the incredible workload where you're trying to take this current semester's teaching and get it online and do it well, and then have to provide additional support for your students because you can see they're struggling. So I think it kind of came in waves. It kept building. It didn't kind of release because you just went from one challenge to the next. And at the end of the day, I think it's extraordinary what our faculty have done, and it's equally important that we recognise how difficult it was, as well as recognising how extraordinarily well a lot of people did. But what I was really interested in your own survey was the extra challenges with unreliable infrastructure. So, particularly when you don't have reliable internet. And so that's something that a lot of work have been going into recently in Australia, and now fortunately our platforms stood up and most people's internet stood up as well and could cope. But trying to put 55, 60,000 students all online, we weren't even sure if the university's own platforms, teaching platforms, could support that. So very scary times at times.
Thank you so much, Professor Catherine. I would like to have a follow-up for you there. And this is because, there is this publish or perish. We're going into the research side, where universities have always pushed faculty to publish more. And we're yet to see the outcome of this year's research output for various countries, but it shows that it hasn't been impacted so far. So do you think that also caused, and I know Australia takes research, especially because that impacts rankings, and rankings impacts the decision of students to go into Australia. So do you think that has further, was that any role to play for additional stress for faculty in Australia or around the world?
Absolutely. We had a lot of disruption to our research. There's been some very good surveys done that actually highlight how many projects were actually either deferred or delayed or disrupted or had to be redesigned. We did a focus survey on research staff in our Institute for Health Transformation. We have, being in public health, we have a very feminised workforce. So we do have a lot of women and young women who work in our research teams, and a lot of them are casual and contract workers. So they had great uncertainty because the impact financially on the universities has been extraordinary in Australia. We've had an increase in our domestic students, so our student load may not change, but we have, of course, had an impact on our international students as well. So we've actually had a real shift in the students that could be in the classroom, or we, for the first time, were teaching our international students remotely online, which was a challenge in itself. But we also had some unexpected challenges when schools were closed. So our mothers, who were also our faculty, had their children at home with them when they were trying to teach online, and they might be trying to work with students anywhere in the world and be looking after their 5-year-old who can't be in daycare or in school. So there were some real challenges there, and those that were parents probably had the most difficulty in adjusting to not just being online but working from their own home and having everyone from their family in their own home because they couldn't go to work or to school. So that was very difficult. But some people, and I would include myself, you adapted to that, and our online world did work quite well with this sort of connectivity that we have tonight. We saved travel time. So people actually reported increased productivity, and the government was very keen to support research in a whole range of areas that would help us in our COVID response. And so there were some grant opportunities that came out of that got some of our even earlier career researchers engaged actively in the COVID response with some funded grants. So at this stage, it might not show in the outputs, but we've also lost a lot of our casual researchers. And so there's going to be, again, thinking about how the teaching changes our long-term view, but also what happens in our research will also change not just the experience of our young researchers now trying to build a track record, but also how attractive this career is for people bright young people in school, will they still see this as attractive because they're seeing in the media all the time, universities laying off staff, and that is particularly our teaching and research staff. So there is a risk that the impacts of COVID, the financial impacts and the short-term stress and all the other things that have gone on with it, we will lose people from the faculty, and we will also not always, I guess, know the impact on whether people will still see that as the career option, which will keep us, growing our faculty in future.
Oh, that's a very interesting point. So I would like to go over to Dr. Arvinder, because in what we have found, and there are two parts to my question to you, and both are coming as a follow-up from Catherine's points there, is 41% of the respondents we had were females. So definitely, while majority of them have to manage a home, have the stress levels at home, had to also take on online teaching. So what do you think in India, what is, in your opinion, in your university or universities, how has that impacted women faculty members? And would this be a career of choice in the future for women to take up academia or get into teaching or research or sort of careers like this?
Yeah. Well, yes, it has impacted. And as you see, as what Professor Bennett shared, I mean, that the issues are pretty much similar in terms of women, mothers, and in India we especially are very, very lucky to have help easily available, which of course was not available while during this pandemic time. Lockdown, the lack of space, the parenting role doubling up, no extra support has led to a lot of challenges. But I wouldn't go as far to say that it wouldn't be the chosen career for women, or it would impact that choice, because I strongly believe that people who choose a career such as this, also it's a space which comes from the heart, and this is a space where each one of us is learning to sort of navigate and see that this is not permanent and this is temporary and this too shall pass, and trying to sort of build on the well-being part of it, of our own selves, to be able to just tide over this crisis period, as I would call it. So,
okay. And a follow-up to that would be is the infrastructure in India. And I think we've all in the early days we were all doing webinars, and I would get disconnected at least twice during the session, even though I'm living in the metropolitan Bangalore. So I think when we look at faculty who are probably working from home, what could institutions do, or what faculty could do to overcome these challenges? Because these are problems to do with infrastructure, the service providers, and so on. So, and there could be several amounts of stress associated with this as well. So, any particular piece of advice you have for this, or any outcomes you think from your own experience?
Sure. See, at Ashoka, there is a diversity in students, and we have students from all over the world, different countries, different cities, small little villages of India, and everywhere in the world. And therefore, connectivity for many of our students is a big issue. And the same way for the teaching faculty. What we really talk about all the time is to just actually cut ourselves some slack. This is an extraordinary time. It is a difficult time, and to expect just about everything, whereas yes, for some of us productivity has increased because the kind of other work or responsibilities that we may have are, have not really been compromised. But for those who are struggling with any of these, like connectivity issues, or even this whole business of having to teach looking at a screen which may or may not have any faces and not be able to engage, apart from the connectivity and not being able to sort of link up with people, I think the bigger challenge is what expectation we have of ourselves. So I would just tell the faculty everywhere that cut yourself some slack. Do know that it's not going to be the same. So devise methods, because also see, there are a lot of interactions at Ashoka, I do know, and I'm sure in most universities. Us being a liberal arts university, we really look at a lot of, focuses a lot on critical thinking, coming up with creative solutions, sort of creative ways of looking at the problem. So I think that that's what we really need to. We look at applying here and we see, cut yourself some slack. Don't expect that because you have more time, it means your productivity will increase. Actually, on the contrary, because there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of frustration and fatigue. Now is the phase where we are in fatigue. I think the fear, uncertainty part over, fatigue is taken over. And do know that, unless we invest in the well-being part, whereas so in every bit that happens, whether there's a connectivity issue, to be able to pick from there, simplify, maybe look at the workload, maybe look at the course load, and come up with creative solutions for now, whether it's the grading or it's the teaching. It won't be the same, but it is there. So we value the fact that we're at least able to connect in some way. I also find that, if the faculty, if the teacher is relaxed and, can have sort of a sense of humor about it, I think it just becomes easier. So of course it's a challenge, but in navigating, accept, acknowledge, and then take some action accordingly, whatever it be, however small it is, but not let it get you down.
Okay, indeed. I mean, that's finding innovative ways to overcome these challenges are required. And I think one of the things I was reading a few months ago was a faculty member in one of the universities in North India converted their whole living room into a classroom format, so the students could get the same experience. So I think that was an interesting thing, and I would like to go with Professor Catherine to share with us what is that you found faculty doing, or your experience to emulate a classroom style teaching while they're going online to help reduce stress levels, and not just for them, but also for students. So any particular ideas or comments you would have on best practices?
Yes, look, I think it's really about the interaction, and depending on the platforms you have and the experience that your faculty has, I think you can actually get some really engaging interaction in the cloud. So it's the difference between doing synchronized teaching and not. And I would hope that in most cases people do it. The risk is students switch off and then come back and watch a recording, and it's never the same as if they're potentially participating. But our teachers have done some really clever work in creating scenarios where the students have to be at play. So you're actually asking people, you have live quizzes, you're getting people to write on the screen, to add their own words when you're challenging them about a particular theory, or even teaching them about, public health responses to COVID. You're actually getting them to express themselves. And I think for a lot of our academics, and I put myself included in that, who aren't as experienced as some of our really young, innovative, high-tech academics, we've got a lot to learn. And I think that's a real transition in itself. So sharing some of those ways we as yet don't fully even utilize the platforms we have, let alone actually making sure our platforms are up to it, because I'm sure some universities haven't got all the add-ons because they haven't thought about that. They've thought, oh, we're just teaching the online ones who can do it online, everyone else will come into the classroom. Whereas now you can create an interactive, dynamic space that I think competes with classroom, and hopefully meets those other needs that the ones who shy away from online usually, their needs, that they can engage and succeed. But we did have a point that Dr. Singh made. With our students, we had to take into account the impact that this transition would have, and their own transition as they started to learn how to actively and effectively engage with online platforms, which we knew would happen over some months this year. And also for our academic staff, we've put things in place where your research productivity this year won't determine how much research time or teaching time you get next year. This will be held on to what you had last year. So it just starts to de-stress a situation, because people aren't thinking, oh, I can't do all these things, and I haven't got all my publications that I wanted to get out this year, knowing that it's not going to change things for you next year, that you've got time to get back to something more normal, even though it might be different to your old normal, is I think a really important way to help de-escalate that kind of sense of panic and fear. But it works for students, knowing that there is consideration of their transition and what their additional things they have to learn just to be able to learn the content of the subject.
Mm-hmm. If I have a follow-up for you there, Professor Catherine. We've seen there's a partial amount of increase, that there's a rapport between the faculty and colleagues and administration, which has worsened during this time. So what could faculty members do, or perhaps what could administration do? One is to have faculty members maybe have online meetings or things to de-stress. So maybe you can tell us about your experience there and what institutions could do in this regard.
So we've had a number of different strategies. Sometimes it depends on the personality of some of the leaders involved, but there's been a really concerted effort to create a tea room kind of atmosphere as well as your meeting room atmosphere. So trying to replace all those dynamics that you would normally have if you're physically in the same space. And that's where you have incidental conversations. That's where you build rapport with people. So you're not just saying, where's that thing I need, or where are my dollars, where are my research dollars? You're actually engaging with people rather than systems, and putting people back in the mix takes concerted effort. We had a new head of school come in over this period, and we had a new dean come into this period, and a new vice chancellor. So we had very senior people taking on their jobs when they were in virtual land, and so it was a real challenge, but it's been interesting to see how that's worked. So we've had a lot of the webinars, the sort of town hall webinars from senior leaders, but also lots of Zoom meetings that are working quite well to actually bring people together on good topics. But at our faculty level, we also have, not every week, but we have Friday afternoon quizzes, and so there's things to bring people together just for half an hour at the end of the week, to try and get them to unwind, to actually have a laugh with their friends. And sometimes that laugh includes laughing at ourselves in COVID. And I think Dr. Singh made that point, often that ability to do that means you share the experience in a different kind of way, which can be really healthy. So all of those things are just ways of making sure that people are checking in on other people, that you can actually see them, hear them, and engage, and make sure they're okay, so that you're whether you're talking to them as a colleague in your teaching team, or they're just another member of the faculty having a fun afternoon tea. That's important. And finally, our Institute for Health Transformation, they've set up kind of like a coffee room, and it's really nicely done because you don't have to book into it. You have to be there at a certain time, and they'll just randomly split you up with someone else. And it's very much the same sort of dynamic that happens if you're both caught at the coffee machine together. And so you just tend to start a conversation. You've only got 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but it's lovely to be kind of thrown together with other people you might not know, and particularly for young staff, to start to build an understanding of the team they're working in, which is really hard, particularly those that only started, just before this all started to happen.
Yeah, thank you so much for those important points, because I think interaction with fellow colleagues, and I think the virtual tea room, and I think the random pairing up with a colleague for a chat is definitely an interesting idea. So for all those joining us on YouTube, we have several comments coming in. You have joined the QSI Gauge Faculty Wellbeing Virtual Roundtable with Professor Catherine and Professor Arvinder. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't yet liked the page, the YouTube page, please click on the subscribe button and also hit the bell icon so you can be notified of future updates. So we are taking questions in. Please keep the questions coming in. An interesting comment here from Rama Krishna, which says the report is it's an interesting takeaway. It is also time for top management of educational institutions to brainstorm, do some out-of-the-box thinking to overcome these challenges. So I would like to go to Professor Arvinder, Dr. Arvinder here, and what do you think Indian leaders, educational leaders, and we have this divide between private and public, and deemed and colleges, and there's different systems in India. Would you like to have some thought on what should leaders be doing more for faculty, for administration, for the institution, as we for well-being purposes in these troubled times?
Well, I think what we really need to understand that any education needs to not just focus on the academic rigor, but also the emotional robustness of students. So the institution has to provide that space for well-being of students, COVID or no COVID. So it has to be, the mental health has to be at parity with every other requirement that the students have to fulfill. So I think the institutions, I can give you examples from Ashoka. For example, our senior leaders have always had, we set up this Center for Wellbeing 4 years back, and I'm actually very proud to say that Ashoka University's Center for Wellbeing is the first of its kind, which focuses not only on the curative aspect of mental health, but also on the preventive and promotive aspects. So we are actually talking about conversations around, mental health, opening spaces, providing safe spaces, so people talk about anything and everything that could be troubling them, that could be coming in the way of their what we call the Ashoka experience, for example. So I think that's what we could extrapolate, that if there is, like, we promote well-being, we have events around well-being. So there is a well-being day we celebrate, there is a gratitude day we celebrate, there is a de-stress day that we sort of organize, just so that people come and talk about it. We have a great peer support system. We have a phenomenal gatekeeper program where students are trained in identifying, and as we do with the faculty as well, in faculty meetings, like, we present on how there are some simple ways of identifying any student in distress, and how that student could then be referred to the right resources, so that the stress or the distress does not become crisis. So there is also a very easy way, whereas we keep every student story confidential, we also have a way where, with the consent of the student, with the written consent of the student, if the student reports to the faculty that they need some kind of accommodation because of mental health reasons, the faculty very kindly accommodates, just certification that they have visited the center for some kind of counseling support. So if we really look at, the preventive promotional aspect of well-being, we find that education becomes this whole process of development of, just not the mind, but the emotions as well. And I think anything and everything that can take care of that is what any educational institution should be doing. So to begin with, not just leave the job to a professional, whereas, I'm, with due respect to professionals, me being one, I'm not axing my profession here, but I'm just saying that building, capacity within the organization. So with the faculty being educated about what it could be for their own selves, their families, and their students. And we also extend it to staff. So the center is open to students, staff, and faculty. And we have everybody and anybody approaching. We also have, like, webinars around it. I know that there is fatigue around it, but once in a way, what Professor Bennett suggested, the tea room, we also have, again, the faculty taking on their own, they take responsibility and onus for their own well-being, and many times organize, little picnics with social distancing and so on and so forth, because it's just very nice to be able to see people face to face and create any which way that you can. By which I'm not really letting the leaders go off and say it's all up to the faculty and students to create spaces, but we also have to create, not just infrastructure, but also, divert some funds towards research and building, the research body around how the mental health is impacted, what are some of the good practices all around the world, what can we adapt, and try and reach out to every single person. Because look at it, faculty from, those who stay on campuses, like Ashoka is a fully residential campus. The faculty is also missing a certain kind of support structure which was available on campus. So there's a lot that's happening. So whereas they take, there's agency to every single human being in this. I would just say it's a multi-pronged approach, which is collaborative, where all stakeholders are involved. Like, for example, we also had a virtual, we always have on our orientation week when the new students come, we also welcome the parents and we have a session for the parents on mental health. We talk about transitioning, how your child is transitioning from home, for the most part in India, to a fully residential campus. What can the parents do? So mental health and well-being is not only about when there's a problem, but it's always about being in a better space wherever you are. And it's been really appreciated, the parent orientations. I don't know, but I have a sense that we're the only one which focuses so much on the mental health component, because we really believe in opening conversations. And it's only when we have the comfort of conversations around mental health that we will actually look at, well-being as an integral part of education. So that would be my take on it.
Dr. Arvind, a follow-up there for you on that. We've seen, this is great in terms of in-person experience. You go into the university, students are looking at other students, can notice stress, report to someone. Faculty more so, you have a faculty room, if somebody sees you're stressed, obviously, if you see something, say something, right? So you will have that in a physical space. What should faculty do in a virtual space? How can they watch out for other colleagues? Do you think a mentorship, a senior faculty member mentoring a younger faculty member who just come in and following them through a buddy system would work, you think, in India? Or do you think there are other ideas to keep a watch or keep an eye on a fellow faculty member's health, well-being, or any increased stress levels besides the tea room and all the other things in this case?
See, there are, again, as I said, when we educate ourselves, then, it's very easy to pick up any of the signs that are happening. So it could be happening in meetings. Mentor-menteeship is a very, very good idea. Also, orienting the new faculty members, because when they're new, they're already struggling, and to not have anyone help them through, especially now that the medium is virtual, becomes a challenge. So mentorship is a very good idea. The buddy system, also akin to it, but more educating, more reaching out, more agency in the part of each faculty member to make it their business, even if it's within within a smaller community. So if we break it up into smaller communities and make sure that everybody is looking out for everyone, noticing if somebody's been absent in those meeting rooms, then on a personal level, just one-on-one, because it just has to be a person-to-person experience, whether it's virtual or physically in the same space. As Professor Bennett, I learned a lot today from what you shared about the various more interactive mediums, and I'm going to definitely try and incorporate that if possible for our own center to begin with, on how much more interaction can happen, because that's when we pick up. Also, when we open spaces, then if someone's going through some kind of stress, it is easy for them to also reach out for help. So it's not always someone who's going to reach out to you, but also the space where if you are going through something, to feel comfortable enough, to feel okay enough, to not feel stigmatized or judged about talking about a mental health concern or any kind of emotional issue, whether it's a family issue or anything. And if every faculty member can assure with confidentiality, just a compassionate hearing, I think there's a lot that can happen through that.
Indeed, I think that's really important, because that showcases the culture of the institution, and it showcases how people have been inducted and what the leadership has initially set the stage on open communication. So over to Professor Catherine here. I would like to hear from you on the importance of leaders and leadership in making these changes in institutions. Do you think that has been vital to the success of Australia in managing the pandemic in the universities and the stress levels? Or do you think there's more which could be done and which the world could learn from Australia?
Always more could be done. we learn as we go. It's been very interesting listening to Dr. Singh talk about particularly that induction, that transition of students into the university, and the times that are those real pinch points where we really should be thinking about supporting people through something that is innately stressful. And so we've put a lot of work into working with students. Our faculty are offered training in mental health, and so that it allows them to identify if there are those warning signs, if someone's withdrawing. We also have it automated into our system. So with our online teaching, it's actually very helpful because you can tell if someone's not accessing the materials, or, you know, we have triggers if they're late in their assessments and so on. So we have a number of signals for students that help us to then reach out to them as well. And importantly, we try and create that space where they know they can access services and support. But sometimes it does take a mediator to make them realise those supports are exactly there for them. You know, they're the people that should benefit from them, and there should be no stigma attached. And it's often can be people thinking they're not bad enough, you know, they're not stressed enough. But in fact, getting in early before it escalates and they become de-stressed, you know, that's when you need to help them. We're perhaps not quite so good with our faculty. So while that mental health training also allows you, if you're in the office and you can see that someone's not looking well, or they're not looking after themselves as much as they did, or they're more absent, then there are those signals. But it's harder to have ways of identifying that online sometimes with staff. So it does make those engagements with less formal interactions really important, just so you can get a read on people. But if someone doesn't participate in them, you just don't know whether they just weren't there when you were there, or, you know, you have to watch out for people. So I do think we need a similar level of signal that someone is struggling, and that we have a way of particularly the leaders reaching out to people. And so our more formal meetings are really important, not just to let someone sit there with just their name on the screen, you know, on a Zoom meeting, but have everyone online, be able to actively engage them and get a read on them. We've just at the final stages of finalising a new mental health and wellbeing plan for staff at our university, and that's really important. And it is that multi-pronged approach that Dr. Singh also promoted. It's about promotion, protection, and support. And the initial focus, I think, was, as traditionally has been, about how you support people that have mental health issues that they bring to work, and may be exacerbated by work. But now it's also recognising that work itself can be the stimulant for some of the stress and distress, and in fact can be quite severe for particularly people transitioning either into new technology or into teaching for the first time, or, you know, a whole lot of other reasons that outside stresses might make their workplace more confronting. So that is about creating environments where you're aware of it when you're doing those workload consultations, where you're realistic about the outcomes and output expectations you're putting on staff, and that there's a whole trust-based system to that people can engage in without fear. And, you know, I was a head of school for many years, and large school, we had a lot of academic staff, and people hated their work planning sessions, their performance reviews. And for me, that's where I learnt about them, where we could plan their futures, we could try and make sure their service requirements were fitting in with their own ambitions. But it took 3 years, because it had been handled very differently before me. It took 3 years for staff to really engage, because they were suspicious, they were anxious, they were trying to resist too much workload. And in fact, that you know, that created a really difficult dynamic to work with. So having all those systems in place, from workload planning, from performance recognition, from that reaching out to staff, all those things have to be kind of lined up for you to create a healthy environment where people can self-identify that they are not doing well, and where they can then be supported in the workplace and linked into some great resources we have internally or externally to help people navigate through that particular phase, or to you know, to actually have more serious mental health issues addressed as well. So yeah, I think we can still do more, but this plan that will come out in the next short while after it goes through its approval process, I think is a really important step from the leadership point of view to say, this is something we think is really important. We recognise work itself is an important part of people's own mental health and well-being, and we're committed to creating that environment, removing stigma, doing all those things we need to do to make that a genuine commitment to our faculty.
Indeed, and we look forward to that, and wish you all the best in that in the new regulations for well-being. I have a question as a follow-up for you, and I think we spoke about providing support and keeping an eye on your faculty members and doing everything in terms of policies, right? An audience asks, is there a need for some financial sops to the faculty members from the institutions to make them feel good during these trying times? So first to Professor Katrin and then to Dr. Arvinder for your comments, and is that the way to go?
It would be lovely. I'd say yes. It'd help me, help everybody. We'd feel good. In fact, it's interesting. We've had major workplace change this year. We're probably going to have some of that anyway with the new Vice Chancellor coming in and a new strategic plan. And there's always some questioning about, whether some parts of the university will be trimmed down or what will happen when you have new leadership. But in fact, the financial impact on Australian universities is enormous. And many universities have had substantial cuts to their faculty. And it's not confined to our sessional or our contract staff, it's also our tenured staff. So that's made people feel nervous, even if they themselves haven't been directly impacted, just the fear that they might be. And also the possibility that their workload might have to change to take on work for other staff that have now been let go. So a lot of difficult times. For our research, in many institutions, so we're certainly not alone at Deakin, discretionary funds that you usually use to employ staff to get that next project started or get those publications finished off were frozen. So in fact, we had less funds availability, less discretionary funds than before, and less funds for the university to put the staff on that they wanted to. So that was a very difficult environment. What they are doing, because we're going to keep working from home, and actually long term we'll have blended working from home and in the office, for those who aren't lab-based academics or clinical-based academics. And they've just talked about giving every staff member, regardless of level, but a set amount, $750 Australian, just towards that home office setup, not their computers and things. The university will cover that, but they are trying to just say to people, so this is long term now. This is something you will have to do longer term, but we want to just give you something that will help you make your home office more suitable and more occupationally safe and good for your well-being. And I think that is good for people's I think it's a very good question, because I do think it's good for people's mentality as well, that they do feel some support and some recognition that you are having to build an office in your home in many cases. A lot of people wouldn't have necessarily had a good workplace set up. So even that small amount, I think it does something to people to think, okay, to get that now, I've probably already bought a new chair, so I had a proper chair to sit in. Now I get the money back for that. And so there's small things sometimes, but that I think is a very significant gesture.
Thank you for that comment. Over to Dr. Arvinder. We have muted. You're muted, Dr. Arvinder. You need to unmute yourself. Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you now. We lost you again. It's muted back again. Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So that was muting from the host side. Sorry, that's okay. Yes, I agree with Professor Bennett that the compensation is an acknowledgement, even though it's a small amount. It's an acknowledgement that we understand that you are investing more, but I would say that's not the only factor that's not the only thing that would keep the faculty motivated. I just find that acknowledging that it's a hard time, acknowledging that the faculty transitioning has been very difficult. teaching is something which is very, it's a very engaged kind of profession, and I think it's very in person. So a lot of, especially I would say faculty in India, have not been accustomed to a fully online, kind of teaching way. Also, as I said earlier, looking at a screen and having to talk and knowing that people can later see this has actually increased the workload, and it's hard to keep the students motivated. So acknowledging that it's tough, increasing the support staff or the teaching assistants or whatever, I think building that kind of support, again, it sort of acknowledges, and for us, better technical support. Like at Ashoka, a help desk was set up, and round the clock we could help people, almost round the clock, not like 24/7, but the faculty could actually, there was a WhatsApp group, there was a phone call, so actually people would help you, the IT would help you navigate if you were in a tough spot, because not everybody is accustomed to suddenly the Google Classrooms, and though we've had an LMS at Ashoka working, but to integrate it with other systems, it was a challenge for the IT, but we did it like literally within the week, and to smoothly transition and to also handhold the faculty through it, because some of the finest of faculty may not be very tech friendly. I mean, personally, it took me a little while to sort of get used to the online sessions, because you just have just this much of the person available. You don't even have the whole body available, so to say, to sort of talk to or work with. So it changes, and I think if we can acknowledge that, yes, emotionally it's a large strain, and something that Professor Bennett had picked up earlier on, the trust and not having to check and report. I think all these actually acknowledge and give respect to the faculty for what they bring. Also create a space of tolerance for those who cannot, be up to speed with things the way they should be, and actually sort of cut everybody some slack on this is a difficult time. And keep reminding and remembering that it is not going to last forever. So till the time it is, what's going to matter is how we navigate this time. So are we going to build up support systems? Are we going to give our faculty the respect that is due? Are we going to support them? Are we going to acknowledge them, their efforts? We're going to build up a culture. Like I said, it's a narrative that we have to build. And this is a beautiful space, actually, to sort of see what messages we are passing on. Faculty is really the most important part of any university. So faculty well-being has to be of paramount importance, because usually, like I said, it's not only about the academic rigor, but it's also the emotional robustness of the institution, and that will only happen when we invest in the human capital. So with that, I would just like to say also the last, if we can educate our faculty on the trauma that this period has, or or the vicarious trauma that they may be absorbing without realizing, and how to deal with that. Do we have facilities for faculty to take a mental health break? So these are small little things that could be instilled in an organization. So we do have webinars, not just faculty, we do a lot for the staff as well, the administration and staff. Whether it's the last Friday of the month, we call it the me time. So post-lunch is the me time for the staff. Faculty, of course, creates their own spaces and would create. To be honest, I'm not aware exactly what that space is for faculty, but I do know that interacting with faculty at Ashoka, I found that there's a lot that they create as a culture, which is that of the university, which just percolates in every little space that we have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arvinder. I know we have a hard stop at 4:00, but I would like to quickly summarize that. I mean, beyond just the money and the support, financial support, it is looking out for the faculty members, providing the space, and watching out for them in terms of support for technology, support in terms of maybe their class scheduling, helping build trust, and the general feeling of well-being amongst amongst everyone. I have a minute for each of you who would like to say any concluding remarks, because I know both of you all have got other engagements, and I would like to go to Professor Catherine first. If you'd like to say anything as your final concluding remarks to the audience.
Look, I think Dr. Singh actually summed it up perfectly just before. This is about the people. It is about our faculty, and we have to look after them. And in these extraordinary times, we have to make that extra effort to really think carefully about, what that needs to change to. And I'm hoping that the legacy of this will be that we actually have a more sophisticated way of understanding how we support wellbeing going ahead. This year we had a wellbeing day. That was something that they gave each staff member just to try and give them headspace. But in fact, the loyalty of the staff, the extra work they put in to deliver so that our students still had a high quality teaching experience was extraordinary. And I think that recognition has come through at the end of the year. And I think everybody's proud of what they have done, and also they can see that the institution appreciates it and recognises it. So I think you're right. It's not about small bits of money or even a day off. It's something else about recognising that it's everyone's loyalty that has come to the fore, and that people have looked after each other in the faculty, and that the now moving ahead and now formalising it in a mental health and wellbeing plan allows us to take the best legacy of that forward. And I think that's really important.
Thank you so much, Professor Catherine. Any final half a minute remark from Dr. Arvinder, please?
10 seconds. So all I want to say is, it's a collaborative pursuit where all stakeholders need to be involved. The students, there's so much to learn from them. The students, the faculty, the parents, the staff, everybody who helps, senior leadership, junior leadership, just about everyone. It's a collaborative pursuit, and it is each one of ours responsibility to look out for our own well-being and that of another fellow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Arvinder and Professor Bennett. Really glad to have you all. Some great comments there. And I think it's all about the people, the culture of the organization, and a lot of learnings from the leadership as well, and takeaways from the session. We'll share this video with all the institutions which are connected with us. I would like to call upon Aishwarya for the final concluding remarks and announcement of a Sustainable Development Goals Initiative with students of India. So over to you, Aishwarya, to make those remarks.
Thank you, Ashwin. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, Dr. Arvinder Singh and Professor Catherine Bennett, for joining us today and sharing your valuable insights. I truly agree that the transition to online teaching and the new workload is definitely overwhelming and a lot of hard work for the faculty. But it's necessary that they cut themselves some slack, relax, and devise some innovative methods which can bring out solutions which are best suited to them. It's also great to know that Ashoka University and Deakin University are taking such well measures to promote well-being. So I would also like to express my gratitude to Dr. Ashwin Fernandez for moderating this session and raising some pertinent questions and concerns which were very well addressed. A special vote of thanks to all our virtual attendees for joining us today. So I would like to take this opportunity to announce our upcoming webinar, which is scheduled on 21st and 22nd December on student outreach programs on SDGs. So we have a short video prepared by our amazing panelists who would be there on the student session. So please do have a look.
My name is Ruthvi and I'm 21 years old. I'm a final year student at NMIMS Mumbai and I'm studying BSc Applied Stats and Analytics. I'm really excited and humbled to be a panelist at the Roundtable Conference of QS.
My name is Manasa Harish. I'm a fourth year computer science major from Bitspanani, Goa campus. I'm going to be a part of the Roundtable.
I'm Mehak. I'm a 19-year-old from Delhi. I'm currently a second year at Ashoka University studying political science and economics. This year, I'm a panelist for the My Sustainable Campus Roundtable Talk.
QS iGate welcomes you to India's first ever student-led national panel discussion on sustainability. Join us.
So So stay tuned to our YouTube channel for knowing more about our upcoming events. And also please follow us on our online platform. Today's event would be also uploaded shortly. So everyone have a great evening ahead and thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.